Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, General Votel, for your many years of service to this country. I heard former Afghanistan Commander Nicholson being interviewed this morning, and he was asked about the circumstances under which we should withdraw from Afghanistan. And he talked about the fact that it should be conditions-based. It should not be based on an arbitrary timeline or numbers of troops that we want to leave there. So have you and General Miller been given conditions whereby we should withdraw troops from Afghanistan? And if so, what are those conditions?
Senator, I think some of that discussion is best left for a different forum here, but certainly General Miller and I speak very frequently about the ongoing situation in Afghanistan and the circumstances that we are trying to create to support Ambassador Khalilzad and to move forward with the reconciliation process.
I share the concerns that have been raised by Senators Reid and Wicker about what's happening right now in Afghanistan, and particularly the framework that's being put in place without the engagement of the Afghan government. Can you tell me how the framework addresses the rights of women in Afghanistan, given the horrific treatment by the Taliban of women during the years in which they were in control?
Senator, I think that perhaps is a question best posed for Ambassador Khalilzad at this particular point. I do agree that the progress that has been made in Afghanistan with women and improving their ability to be part of the fabric of life in Afghanistan is an important one that has to be incorporated in this, and I would envision that this would be part of the more detailed discussions that will take place between the Taliban and the government of Afghanistan. But certainly we acknowledge that, and we see the goodness that has brought to the country of Afghanistan.
And I would point out that we have actually passed legislation in this Congress that says women should be at the negotiating table when conflicts are being resolved around the world. So is it your understanding that that is a basis on which we are looking at negotiations?
Well, certainly, again, as Ambassador Khalilzad and our diplomats work with the government of Afghanistan on that, I would imagine they are emphasizing that legislation.
To move to Syria, there is the report of a new DOD Inspector General report relative to ISIS. And the report says that the command organization for ISIS is intact and its fighters are battle-hardened. That's a quote from the report. And it goes on to say that within a year, U.S. military commanders told the IG that ISIS would be resurgent in Syria. Can you talk about how we can prevent ISIS from becoming resurgent if we have no troops in Syria and if Iran and Russia and Assad are in control in Syria?
Well, Senator, we're as I mentioned in my opening comments, that is an aspect of the ongoing planning that we are pursuing right now. The answer to the question is that we do have to keep pressure on this network. That it is a resilient network. It does have certain components that are still left in it, although they are dispersed and disaggregated. They have the capability of coming back together if we don't. And so there are a variety of different things that I'd be happy to talk about. Some of the things under consideration as we get into the closed session here. I won't speculate publicly here about things that we might do, but there certainly are different ways that we could do this, working with partners, working with our own capabilities to continue to keep pressure on this network, which I think is absolutely vital.
So you do agree with the Inspector General that ISIS is a scourge that's latent in both Syria and Iraq, and it has the potential to resurge if not addressed?
I do agree.
Thank you. As I know you're aware, when we provide or sell U.S. weapons to end users, there are requirements which prohibit the transfer of any of those weapons to third parties without prior authorization from the U.S. government. In legislation that we passed relative to Yemen, there are requirements for us to certify how the Saudis are using weapons. And so far, we have not gotten authoritative certification of how those weapons are being used. And there is, again, a recent CNN report that suggests that weapons that have been provided to UAE and to Saudi Arabia have wound up in the hands of Houthis, that they have been traded and been used on both sides of that conflict. Can you talk about what DOD is doing to address that?
Well, Senator, I am aware of the references that you're making to that, and we have not authorized Saudi Arabia or the Emirates to retransfer any of this equipment to other parties on the ground in Yemen. And as you are well aware, when we do provide equipment, whether it comes government to government or commercially provided, that the recipients do have to agree to certain stipulations on the use of those, and that we do have monitoring and enforcement mechanisms that sometimes go through the Department of State if it's commercially provided, through the Department of Defense if it's government to government provided, and requires us to conduct surveys, requires us to conduct inventories of this type of equipment so we know where it is. So there are processes in place with this. I would also highlight that in some of these cases, again, I think we have to look more closely at the allegations in this particular situation to find out what happened. As we've seen in Iraq in the past, where we saw our partners overrun, we have seen American equipment provided to them, lost in the course of a fight, end up in the hands of our adversaries out there. And so I think we will have to examine that better. But to your point of our responsibilities in terms of ensuring proper end use of the materials, we absolutely get that and emphasize that with our partners all the time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.